So hello, everyone. Greetings from Broto Art Climate Science. My name is Ian Edwards. I'm founder of this program, and I'm executive director from the Cape Cod Center for Sustainability. Broto is one of our programs and seeks to hybridize art and science exploration in innovating climate crisis remedies. Since 2018, Broto has been a conference experience and an art exhibit through which we have explored the nature of collaboration, scale, time, and global citizenry through art and both physical and social sciences. So I wanted to share my screen here for 1 second. The innovation here is that there's the addition of the third person. We have artists and scientists and someone we call a producer who works alongside with the artists and scientists that gives the synthesis idea to someone who's not the artist and science thinker. What it hopes to do is free up art thinking and science thinking to do what they do rather than trying to communicate exactly what they are. And oftentimes art and science collaboration is sort of top down, where the science gives the art data to make accessible. And that's not the idea here. The idea is to bring in the artist as a full partner. So you can read more about us at www.Broto.eco. And you can also donate to us if you want to at our website, also www.broto.eco. So part of our work in the past year has been to put our collaboration framework to work in the field, testing it in real world scenarios. And so today is about progress, reports from the 2 collaboration teams that we had commissioned last year. So congratulations on that. And thank you for joining us. That's Future Playground and Ecology Extended. So welcome to the teams. I'm going to let you introduce yourself in a second. Also here are some of our steadfast collaborators from the Collaboration Blueprint Working Group. So thanks to them for joining us. And I just want to get started. So who wants to go first? Let's say Cassandra. Why don't we do you first? So you want to give us a brief introduction to your project, and then we can get into some of the discussion between the 2 groups.
Great. We are Future Playground. I'm Cassandra, an artist in the crew. We have Johannes and our other artists. We have Giselle, one of our producers, Christopher, our producer and cultural advisor, and then we have Leon, our scientist. And we're all hailing from West Coast, USA, Germany, as well as Trinidad and Tobago. And our project, Future Playground Island Resiliency, is really all about creating immersive narratives around climate science. But we want to take a fictional route to hopefully dismiss all of the negative communication around climate crisis and make our futures more exciting and possible, that we can have positive turnouts. And so for us, our project is all about creating desirable future stories. And so our project is really about trying to take science and turn it into snackable, engaging experiences, whether that's through immersive VR, virtual reality, augmented reality, or social media. Our entire goal is to make science and our future in itself a speculative and playful experience for folks. For our group, since we're international, we've collaborated using an online whiteboard, and this was really a chance for us to experiment and not get so caught up in the grind of producing just a quantity amount of artwork. It was also a chance for us, even though we're all hybrid individuals in our disciplines, to really explore moments of fun. When we wanted to dive into the research, we just went all in. When we wanted to strategize about social media, we played there. When we wanted to get feedback from folks outside of our group to test just concepts of our artwork, it allowed us the time and space to actually listen to our gut and follow that thread of exploration. And so for us, the storytelling format was really important to figure out, are we going to go with VR first? Are we going to go with social media right away? How do we get participation in our future ideas? So we messed around with 360 videos. We also played with Google Cardboard and virtual reality, but we felt that we didn't have an idea of what the people wanted necessarily. So we landed on social media, and that being an important preliminary means to engage with our content. So we have here just a layout of our artwork that we've come up with. And this was a way to see how the quality of and the resonance value of our storytelling was. So this hasn't been launched yet. We're still in the behind the scenes of it, but this is just a preview of what we essentially want to do and create an ongoing series of engagement for whatever following we build. And so today we're going to show you what we've come up with more specifically. And the end game for all of this is to create a hybrid in-person exhibition, hopefully boots on the ground in Trinidad and the Caribbean, where we can have, our widespread of global audience together to engage, but in real life with the people that have inspired this entire story.
Future facts, from science fiction to science fact. Many ideas in science fiction later became science fact. Some ideas were so exhilarating that people couldn't help but to make them a reality. So let's explore desirable futures together. This ongoing art series highlights innovations yet to be discovered or in their prototype stages. We imagine how they could look if they were fully actualized, speculatively testing their potential. Share your thoughts and ideas about our future facts on our page. Together, we can sow some sci-fi seeds for a positive future.
The following trailer is rated I. Intended only for imaginative audiences. Viewer discretion is advised.
Island nations of the future. Are they lost when oceans rise, storms increase, and heat scorches? Journey with us to a future island that has not only survived, but evolved to thrive. Welcome to Reeffilia. Once a rescue mission, now a resilient refuge. Let's explore how people build their homes like corals, escape heat in snail houses, and weather storms in mangrove-inspired structures. This island is built on seeds of resilience. But how did it happen? Coming soon, right here on this page. In our future, we live in heat-shielded homes, thanks to snail shells. Future coastal abodes are designed to resist extreme heat. Raised off the ground, cool air is let in from below. Their inner spiral layout and reflective materials lead to cooler rooms without air conditioning. The inspiration for these dwellings comes from nature. The spiral structure of snail shells have a neat cooling effect. The further in the shell, the cooler it gets. Snail shells also reflect most UV rays. Future snail homes mimic this unique layout. Just like the snail, they have smart reflective walls to ward against intense sunlight. This future has been explored by students from the Art University of Isfahan. In our future, we live in hurricane-proof houses, thanks to mangroves. Future coastal homes are raised on branch-like stilts to prevent flooding. Like mangrove roots, these interlocking and stabilizing stilts are resilient to storm waves because they distribute the impact of wind and waves. The round house design is also hurricane-resistant. The inspiration for these structures comes from nature. These mangrove buildings are placed behind swamp-guarded coastlines that weaken storms, trap flotsam and allow damaged areas time to reseed and rebuild. Notice how mild the waves are by the houses, and how rough they are out here. Storms simply flow around these mangrove buildings due to their wind-friendly design. The interior is made of a spoke and wheel frame that flexes and branches outward to reinforce the house's structure. Its top peak is weighted to prevent the house from flying away during wind-swept storms. This future is currently being explored by Deltec. In our future, we live in carbon capture condos, thanks to corals. Our future homes store excess carbon dioxide in their walls. Most industries have transitioned from releasing harmful carbon to creating life-supporting carbon. However, some areas are still hard to fully neutralize. The unhealthy CO2 that those industries emit is captured and turned into concrete. The blueprint for this idea comes from nature. Corals transform carbon dioxide into a building block to grow their reef. Coral-inspired concrete is made based on this same process of turning CO2 into limestone, which is needed to make concrete. This insight from coral reefs helps us to build better buildings and save corals that suffer from too much carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. It's a win-win. This future is currently explored by Blue Planet Systems.
So that's our artwork in a nutshell. And our main goal for this artwork is to hopefully gain enough traction and investment in these initial ideas so that we can turn it out into real world experiences, and that hopefully islands get a new perspective globally from the outside that they are not only experiencing all these intense climate challenges right now, but they're also a model for how we can prototype adaptable solutions towards our climate crisis, and that we can see islands as reephilia, a familial and deep connection to coral reefs, to all of this amazing tropical and island flora and fauna that is worth conserving and learning from. So that's our project. Thank you very much.
Well, congratulations. Thank you for the presentation, and we'll get to talk more about it, but I've always liked the idea of imagining a world made sustainable. It's one of my go-tos when we're talking creatively about climate remedies. So this was right up the Broto alley, and I'm glad you were able to spend some time playing with the idea and getting this far. Rich and Rita, so let's play that video, Rich.
Ecology Extended is an interdisciplinary collaboration between ecologist Dr. Rich Blundell, myself, artist Rita Leduc, and the Hubbard Brook Experimental Forest, a temperate montane habitat. The project uses the ecological dynamics of nature to create a radical new eco-cultural paradigm of listening and belonging. To accomplish this, we combine a curriculum of ecological principles called OECO, a site-specific visual art practice, and participatory engagement with the natural sciences, place-based or indigenous knowledge, and recent advances in cognitive science. Ecology Extended makes a few claims. Number 1, the ecological dynamics inherent in nature are implicitly ameliorative and transformative. Number 2, by entering into a participatory relationship with nature, we can be healed and transformed. Number 3, the ecological dynamics inherent in nature are implicitly creative. And number 4, we can use the creativity embedded in a relationship with nature to extend transformation into culture. The first instantiation of Ecology Extended is with the Hubbard Brook Experimental Forest in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. The project is supported by OECO, the Hubbard Brook Experimental Forest, and Broto, Art Climate Science. The project began with a tour of the forest. Lindsay Rustad, lead forest ecologist, provided an overview of the research happening at Hubbard Brook. Together we explored the 8,000-acre temperate woodland valley, including 9 experimental weirs that measure a range of ecological and hydrological metrics. This was followed by 12 days of immersive fieldwork where we exercised our individual practices as well as shared them with each other. Our overarching goal was to open ourselves to the forest and listen. This may sound trivial and unambitious, but when one succeeds in this goal, a cascade of insights and creativity follows. As we hiked, researched, played, listened, and engaged in our various forms of art, we established a rapport with the habitat and discovered different modalities circulating through the shared ecosystem of materiality and consciousness. This yielded deep senses of interconnection and belonging. We left the forest both embodied and enacted. In other words, in addition to dissolving the mind-body dualism, we perturbed the inner-outer divide of personal identity. This period of time filled us with ideas, experiences, emotions, understanding, and in some profound ways, the forest itself. This is not a metaphor. The forest shifted into us, and us into the forest. Save for an encore visit in the middle of winter, we have not been working physically at the Hubbard Brook, but we keep the project alive within and between us. For me, part of this means working in my home studio with the visual data I collected on site. There, I weave together experience and memory, but also implicit knowledge and imagination. This liberates the on-site experiences from their physical location and allows conversations to expand and evolve off-site. Using abstract languages, the artworks reify conversations I had in the forest with human and non-human collaborators alike about baselines, tipping points, passion, reciprocity, trust, and expanded consciousness. While I use visual languages to nurture my relationship with the forest, Rich is perpetuating his conversations from the perspective of an ecologist, natural history guide, and writer using the language of ecopoetics. We communicate with each other frequently, nurturing the project and following it wherever it leads. So there's this very real triangulation of Rich, Rita, Forest that we sustain, holding this thing that exists not fully in any one of us, but in the liminalities between all three. It is through these relationships that we keep this thing going and growing. But also, through these relationships, this thing we hold together is keeping us alive, healing and transforming us. This is the ecological intelligence of Hubbard Brook Forest extended into our lives. So the question now is how to extend it further. How do we transfer these feelings of understanding and passion and reciprocity and kinship? Right now, the forest is plugging away, growing, adapting, giving. How can we? What we can say is that Ecology Extended has worked and is working because it replaces trust in the world. When this happens, when we are willing to open ourselves and listen and share and play and be vulnerable and true, we find ecological intelligence. Currently, this intelligence says to offer a variety of entry points to engage culture. So we are creating physical art, developing a tokenomic model for the blockchain, leading workshops, giving presentations, engaging in conversations, and extending this model into additional conservation and restoration projects. The video that follows, The Life Cycle of a Mushroom, is an example of this multifaceted approach. It is the first of 4 ecological interpretations that Rich is creating for each of my 4 paintings and their corresponding gifts. It offers but one of the insights of ecological intelligence that we gained through our relationship with Hubbard Brook. Our hope for this video, and Ecology Extended writ large, is to embody precisely this insight: creativity in the service of continuity. Thank you and enjoy.
This is an Oika interpretation by Rich Blondell of The Life Cycle of a Mushroom, an oil painting by Rita Leduc. What do I see in this work? Fecundity. A biologist will tell you that fecundity refers to the capacity to bear offspring. Oika sees fecundity as creativity in the service of continuity. This art was made with and within a matrix of intelligence. Mushrooms are the fruiting bodies of a mycelial web strung among the detritus of life. Life invisible, until it's not. Each individual mushroom is continuous but not equivalent. They are the expression of a distributed vitality that embeds itself in the world, in the artist, in the art, and in the audience. Mushroom fecundity manifests through shape, color, form, and texture. Shape, color, form, and texture. Fecundity implies surprise, a conspiracy that can obliterate notions of individual hubris. So don't talk to me of the doom and gloom of tipping points unless you're willing to also sing about the life force and love that's in the air we breathe. Creativity springs from the liminal space and can reach us through art. You're hearing these words, seeing these shapes, feeling these forms because you're supposed to, right now. I feel fecundity at work here. What do you feel?
Congratulations. Rita and Rich, what is your main message in that 9-minute video? What are you what's that one idea you want to get across?
Well, I would imagine, first of all, was just to sort of give an overview of the project and how it unfolded, but then secondly, to put it into practice. And the fundamental idea here is that there's an intelligence in the forest that we've largely forgotten as a society. Of course, there are traditions that maintain that connection and maintain that intelligence, but overall, we've sort of forfeited for other things. And so the goal there was to show that it's that intelligence is still there, it's accessible to us, that it is a creative process that we can participate in, and that it's something that needs to be communicated and felt, because it's a fundamental part of healing if our species is to survive long term, I think.
Is kind of indigenous knowledge the link between the two projects? Because I'm sensing that there's,
I'm hesitant to use that term, in this context, just because of what it's come to mean. But as a scientist, the term indigenous means to be of a place. It is the thing that's found in place. So I do think that it might be wise to reinvent or to acquire that idea that anyone can be of a place. It's not just particularly about it's not about any particular group of people that can be indigenous. In fact, we all need to be indigenous, and that's the idea. It's not to appropriate that idea, but it's to extend that idea. So yeah, but to answer your question, yes, indigenous ways of being are at the core of this.
Yeah, I would say it's, and I would like to hear what the other group has to say about this. To me, it's about like honoring that idea, and then offering a variety of entry points for people who may not be as familiar with that idea. So through, the multimedia things at the end of the video, we were talking about, we're doing all these things to try to welcome other people into these experiences and into these knowledges that, we are learning from, and other people can too.
Yeah, one of the reasons why I wanted you guys to go and do your collaboration was that part of the blueprint is that we're process based, not outcome based. So you go into a collaboration thinking, I'm going to do this regardless of what the outcomes may or may not be, and see where the journey takes us. So I sense that that is very much part of what you did. Future Playground, do you have a take on indigenous knowledge, political or not?
I can definitely say from the cultural advisor perspective that it was something that we had to battle as well, right? So the Caribbean is like really rich in history, but it's also built in like this idea of like trade of people and very large movements of different people culturally. So indigenous people to us can mean what we can call the Amerindians, but it can also be Africans who were brought here. It can be the Indians who were brought here for indentureship. So battling this idea of what do we put forward as Caribbean culture was something that was very difficult to consider. Eventually settling on all of these things do make up what the Caribbean narrative is now. And it's very hard to take that away and still call this the Caribbean. And I think that Future Playgrounds really, especially Cassandra and Johannes, really excellently pull those pieces together to create something that feels like a potential future, but doesn't feel too foreign to somebody who is from here.
Yeah, I'm sensitive to the word indigenous. I understand exactly what the political issues are of it, but the climate crisis is a colonial crisis. It's about conquest. So I think personally, I think it's fair here and it's informative. So how did you guys engage the blueprint model? This idea of there's, three people in this marriage. Did it take it further? Was it a complication? Did it add? Did it detract? What is your sense of what this this triangle is?
I don't know about marriages, but in this situation, three people it was a lot of fun. I don't know about but well, I had a blast working on it. But yeah, exactly, polyamory. There is a word, yes. So I would have to say, and this was a big takeaway for me, I learned more about my context by working with folks who are outside of my context, right? My local context. So I found myself, as Christopher was saying, observing the natural world and observing our city and our whole country with fresh eyes, and really hearing the voices of these different, being essentially in that nexus point between science and art, right? So it kind of, I don't want to say it forced us, but it invited us into a different way of looking at where we live. And I actually think that's a common thread with the other project as well, because I don't see it specifically as indigenous or not indigenous. The climate change issue is so big. It's going to impact all of us for a very long time. I mean, this is essentially the challenge of our generation and generations to come. It's a species-wide event. And I think that we have to have that developed, we have to develop that intimacy with where we live and the natural ecology of the place. So I don't see the projects as being that different, even though on the surface of things, they are quite different. But that empathy, that understanding of ourselves as not being separate from nature, I think that's crucial, because if we understood that on a visceral and fundamental level, we would live very differently.
Yeah, I guess the empathetic scientists and the scientific artists are necessary hybrids today. Maybe Ecology Extended. What is your take on this three-part partnership?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the obvious thing is that there's two of us here.
Yes.
And it's interesting, like what ended up happening. Like we started off with Lindsay and Rich as the producer, and then myself. So Lindsay was a scientist, but Rich he is a scientist. And so what ended up happening was sort of like we had these two like solid, constants. And the third thing, we've been calling it the third thing, the third participant was sort of amorphous. And so like at times it was Lindsay, at times it was the forest, at times it was like a coder who was like working on the NFT stuff. And so it became, I don't know, it was kind of cool where we always left space for like a third thing. But that placeholder like changed in a really organic way that really worked. And we've talked a lot about like, are we like, is this not what the blueprint meant? But like what's working, let's just see what happens. That's the whole point. So yeah, that's what, I don't know, Rich, would you add to that?
Maybe just to say that, at the end of it, like ours did sort of, it didn't break the framework. It actually, in a way, it solidified it. But at the end of all this, no one's really expecting Rita to go do science, and just as the same as no one's expecting me, thank God, to go do art. And so there was, like her term amorphous really count, and it is in that amorphous space that third thing emerged. I thought that was really, so it worked. I think the framework is beautiful and it works. Even when it doesn't work, it ends up working.
Yeah, for people who have been with the Broto project since the beginning, my aspiration has been this third paradise, this magical, mythical world that lives between art and science. And I believe it's real, and maybe just unicorns live there. But I mean, the idea is that there is a hybridized, polymath approach to these transdisciplinary exercises that I think add value. And that's maybe theoretical, but I'm hoping you guys sort of saw that in the field. Did it take you anywhere new or unexpected or surprising?
I would love to build on that, because I think what's fascinating for our team, because we're such extreme generalists across the board, is it's not so much an identity. I mean, each of us contain multitudes. We all have our passions in all three of these spheres, and which is why Cassandra placing us on the diagram is not in any certain circle, but really on the edges and in between. And so what I think in the process that brings up is what roles we're taking on and how we're actually showing up in the space and how we're taking on different perspectives and hats at any given moment. And just making sure that we do have a diversity of perspective and be able to create those intersections that we're looking for to create the content, to create the inspiration and ideas. And partly, I think, for our journey in the biomimicry space as well, leaving space for the natural world to be part of that in its own way, in their own way, in Key's own way. And that's, I think, what we're constantly shifting through, not so much just in the science of it and the whole bioinspiration, biomimetics, whatever you want to call it, as opposed to what does it look like to bring that spirit or that other way of knowing into the space. And so I think we see much of that in your work, Rich and Rita. I think it's fascinating to think about how do we create the process to allow that to actually breathe and allow that to guide us in the exploration and the journey of this exploration multitudes, of this futuring. And for us, we definitely often always say it is as much of an art as it is a science. But honestly, it's both all the time. It's just what we're paying attention into and what we're looking at the given time.
Yeah, I see a lot of overlap between biomimicry and ecological intelligence. I don't know if you guys would agree or disagree, but there's the idea that there should be something out there to be telling us and informing us something that we hadn't already thought of. It's an act of faith, which is probably not scientific, but
Totally, it's ultimately semantics at this point. It's all a journey and exploration of connection and right relationship, right, and how we're manifesting that in the world.
Rita, you had a point?
Yeah, just to hear, I mean, I always love the surprise question, because surprise is like a lot of, actually Rich and I talked about surprise a lot, and being open to it and keeping yourself open to it. And so something that maybe surprised me, but maybe also just like solidified for me is this, like the feeling of precipice, like the feeling of being open and on the edge of something. And like I said, like throughout the process, people would ask, how the project is going or something. And I started saying, like, if I always feel like I'm in the middle of the project, that means I'm doing it right. So there was this, like, if that makes sense, like this feeling that there's just always going to be something next. And so we're always kind of in this like intuitive, really exciting space of openness and surprise, like striving for the next thing. And so getting comfortable with being in that sort of uncomfortable space. was a nice surprise. Like, I think that like now when I feel that sort of discomfort, vulnerability, sort of like queasy, like that actually, I now feel like that's the right space to be in. And that's really a great thing to like recognize.
Anybody else have a comment on that?
I have to just wholeheartedly agree. It's huge. I think it's really, really essential to, I mean, I spent some time working with a charity called Tree Sisters, which is literally women and trees, and understanding the importance of feminine leadership in tropical reforestation. And one of the core tenets of that organization was understanding nature and understanding feminine leadership. It is not just about telling, allocating resources, but understanding that it's a iterative process and a communication process, and understanding that nature also has needs. So, I mean, it's really beautiful to hear it in this context and to really, in some ways, let go of even definitions around gender and any kind of definitions like that, because it's a uniquely and importantly human quality. I think we have to do this moving forward.
Yeah.
I think my internet connection is kind of in and out. So.
Yeah. No, I'm hearing you. I'm hearing you.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I find the approach, I mean, if you look at history and the way that climate has been dealt with and this business-centric or growth-centric model that has been applied to fixing climate, which is, not congruent in my mind, that, this kind of dialogue is, it's not the norm. It's something that we need to build on and create more of, because the idea of status quo or business as usual or the way that things have always been done, well, it's not working. So what else can you do? So I wanted to leave some time at the end for just other sort of random questions, but Cassandra, where does your project go next?
I think this is a great question, maybe for Johannes and Giselle, because they've been, as well as Christopher, they've been projecting quite a bit of where they could see it. And I've just been so in the moment and present. And I just want to say that the blueprint was phenomenal for us so that we could be present. I think a lot of us have a tendency in our freelance life to juggle so many things that, we have the anxiety of wanting to see the change in our generation now in our life when it comes to climate change impact. But this gave us a chance to breathe and to just be in the moment and embrace the fact that every little thing that we're doing is creating a small ripple effect. So even if it's a small prototype that we're throwing out there as a concept, this idea of perfectionism, we've tried really hard to let go. But as you can see, our project is not finished yet. It's pre-alpha, so not even alpha stage yet. So, but I'll let Johannes and Giselle talk about, as well as Christopher, talk about what's the next step for us.
I mean, it's really just the beginning. There are so many more stories that could be told, right? I mean, a resilient island, there are so many more aspects that we could talk about. Right? We focused only on the built environment this time, but we looked into so many other storylines and ended up throwing them out. And sometimes we noticed like, it doesn't feel right. This is not what we want to present, because we want something that is nice, like fun and a snack size, and something that is easy to engage with. And sometimes it was really important to have that freedom, because there were a couple of times where we worked and then we ran into, like, we just didn't really feel it. It didn't feel fun enough. It felt like too head heavy. And then we had the freedom to shift gears and to just like, step back and refocus a little bit onto something else. And that was really, really helpful. So I could see way more stories of different scenarios that we could tap into. And also as a next step, I guess I would like to render it to another extent. I would like to build it fully out, that it is, like also visually really impressive. This is in a way just like a pre-alpha stage to share the ideas, to talk about the ideas, but we really want to get to a level where it is really immersive visually too, that it feels like you can it's almost there, you know, like it's supposed to trick your mind. You're like, is this real? Is this already there? That's what we want ideally. And then perhaps also from social media to move into a VR space to be even more immersive. And what's even more immersive than that is to put it into a physical space, of course. And ideally have some sort of like hybrid exhibition so that on the one hand, it is accessible to everyone, but also it has like this nice like local context, you know, where it can be shown. Like that would be really important to us.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I definitely see it being very impactful in education. So like one of the biggest issues we have in the Caribbean is that a lot of our education is still Eurocentric, right? So people are studying architecture, but they're learning to build like brick houses that aren't ventilated in the Caribbean, and they don't think about how much the context that we live in should impact the things that we make. This is probably one of the first times I can imagine seeing this in an education standpoint. Like if I was in university and I saw this in my first year, that could really shift how I view my future, right? And it might not be tomorrow, but 5-10 years from now, the impact a project can have like this on the Caribbean space is really, really phenomenal. Because, and it has to do with representation in general, right? Being able to see yourself and imagine seeing yourself in a particular context goes leaps and bounds into motivating you. When I was in school, we had really big environmental workshops that led me into getting into environmental work. So these speculative works can lead to speculative facts, you know, the science fact comes into play. And I'm really, really excited to see it happen.
Yeah, just real quick, I know Rita had something to say, but I wanted to add to that. I definitely think, as all art should, we want it to be able to be interactive and engaging. And so part of this is also how can we bring up the voices of other people that have these stories, that want to share their ideas, their dreams, their lived culture, you know, their placefulness. And I think that's going to be exciting to create space and community for that. But also coming from a scientist perspective, like I've worked for Biomimicry Institute and Ask Nature. What I had always dreamed for that is how do you create the space that then influences the education and the academics to do the research, to ask the questions that aren't being asked. And partly, like that is the biggest, I think, bridge back to that space that will radically shift how we're then looking at, you know, actually moving the needle forward for a lot of this climate space work.
Rich and Rita, what's next for you guys?
Well, I just wanted to say really quickly, like just to Future Playground, like I know, especially in talking with Cassandra, I know that you had all these you have these things in your mind that you want to still do, but like as an outsider listening, like it's just beautiful, and like what you presented is beautiful, and like if you can always, even if you do the exhibition and like the VR thing, like you will, my hope is that you will always have like something next that you want to be doing. And so as someone who can't read your mind, like what you've presented gives me hope, and like seeing you all work together is like it's already working. And I think that like this ties into, I mean, I'm saying this because I have to tell myself this all the time, and like Nature and Rich teach me how to feel more comfortable in this space of like, okay, there's going to be more and it's going to expand and extend, but like right now we're extending it within this little group that we're in, and like that's enough, and that's really beautiful, and that's something. So it's just really nice hearing you all talk about what you're going to do, because what you have done is awesome. So
yeah, I would echo that as well, but also just to say that the extended part is now, like, and into the foreseeable future. So like we're deep in, and we're constantly, things are coming up and we're getting the chance to talk about it again and again. We just have a workshop coming up in the UK where we're going to use this project as the portal by which we talk about all of these things that we're talking about. But one last thing I just want to say about, you know, when we started this, when I first heard about this, it was really slated to be one project. I don't know if you remember that. And then there was this whole sort of scandal about, oh, we have two, we must have two. And now I'm thinking about just how beautiful it is that there's two, because what I'm seeing is this really sort of elegant pragmatism between the two projects. I really loved your project. It was fun to listen to. It was good. And what I was seeing was that it was very practical. It was like, here's how you build buildings, you know, that mimic nature and call on nature. And then I looked at ours, which in some ways it's the same, but in some ways it's different. And how I think it's different is that what we're exploring in Ecology Extended is the kind of way that the people who live on that island would have to think. You know, like what we're talking about is like the spiritual dimension of the population that would live on these Rephilia places. So what's cool is that without Rephilia, without that way of living, there's no future. It's not going to happen. But without what we're doing with Ecology Extended, we're not going to build the Rephilia. So we really need both of these two things. We need a mindset and a way of being and feeling connected to the world so that we build Rephilia, so that we can continue to do, like, so the two things are utterly essential. So I just think I'm just really happy that it ended up being two projects instead of one.
Well, conversation is always better with two people. So I appreciate that. I just wanted to open it up to other questions that have come up from the floor. We have people from our Collaboration Blueprint working group here. I don't know if they want to ask a question. Nick, hello, Nick. Question.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for sharing your projects today. It's really lovely to be on this call and share this space with y'all. Super excited about the people power in the room. I just am really energized by you all as a cohort, are incredibly exciting. So thank you so much for your time today. I want to jump back to talking a little bit about the third thing as you've described it. And to ask a little bit more about, we talked a lot about it working in different ways in different contexts on these different projects, shifting over time and kind of taking different forms. I'm curious to know a little bit more about what it meant for you when it was working. What did working mean to you, and how did you know that it was working? I think Rita sort of touched on that a little bit in talking about, that being able to hang out in that tension space, or that like always in the middle is like a good way of assessing sort of like if she's in the right spot on a project. But I wonder for other folks in the call, how they could assess and how they knew that that third thing was working for them in the blueprint.
Yeah, how did I know it was working? I mean, we're talking about these things in theory, right? But this is really my life. So for example, I am the founder of a life center design consultancy. So to me, the scenarios being presented are very real for a number of reasons. One, because I land inside of feasibility, constantly thinking about, okay, well, how could we actually create buildings like this? How do we get architects to think this way? How do we create spaces where these kinds of conversations can happen locally and people can actually become energized enough to embed it in their process and their practice, right? And on top of that, we live on an island, right? So it's kind of like this idea of island resiliency and strength that isn't this strength that is typically considered to be strong. That stuff is very powerful for me. A simple example of how I know it's working, for example, okay, this is a kind of a litmus test, it's a cheesy story, but I kind of broke a rule before the meeting. Sandra, please forgive me. I showed my mother the video. Because she's like, oh, okay, yeah, your friends in Germany. I'm like, yeah, those guys. So yeah, and she's 74. She understands this climate change thing. And other than that, she's just chugging along. She's a chef. And when she saw the video, she was like, okay, so there's hope. Left speechless. I was like, okay, something is working. But to me, that's success because, there's no amount of, me blabbing and trying to explain things about biomimicry or using any of these big words means anything to someone like my mom, or quite frankly, the average person. Like, let's just be real. The average person is just trying to survive, especially during a pandemic, right? So to me, that success is really seeing the average person light up and understand that, okay, not only is there hope, there's something that I can do today. There's something that I can maybe shift differently, and embed in my life, and this will actually create the change that the world needs.
Rich and Rita, you're muted, Rich. What is the evidence that it's working for you?
Well, the one thing that came to mind with our project was that there were a number of occasions where I felt like, or the energy of it was that we had ambushed our scientists, which I think is like what needs to happen in some sense, So I think just, she was not nearly as sort of, motivated or part of the development process, but once we showed her what we were doing, there were moments where I could see the gears grinding, and then boom, there was this epiphany. So in that sense, by putting us all together in that framework, it worked.
Awesome.
I would just add that I interpreted that question in a completely different way, which is like maybe wrong and maybe valuable. So I'll throw it out there. Which is that, like, when I think of it working, I don't think about any sort of like how it's working on other people. I think about like how I know that it's like working, because like sometimes we would have conflict or something that was difficult, and like sometimes that means that something's not working, but also sometimes that means that that is what working looks like that is part, like failure and difficulty, challenge, obstacle, like that's all part of figuring out where the constraints are, where the opportunities are, which was another ecological principle that we talked about, and one of the paintings is named that. But so for me, it was a feeling. Okay, I'm the artist in the room, so I'm going to talk about my feelings. But like it was this, I call it like it was staying alive. Like it felt alive, and so there were like moments where we could tell that the project was just like, it was just like so alive. And then there were times where it would maybe, so when you need to water your house plant, like it's kind of, you could tell. So yeah, I would just add that there was something about just like the sense that the thing was working whenever it felt really like vivacious and alive, even if that moment was a challenge. That was sort of the feeling that I would just kind of go off of.
I think for the group, what I'm channeling from Nick's question is the struggle that we've had of naming this third thing. And the third thing is a producer or observer or a synthesizer or hybridizer or friend, foe, den mother. I don't know. You can give it all kinds of labels, but really it's just this. Conceptually, it's always been this third party who is a friend to the project, the bridge to the mainstream, someone who can, I don't know, be the third vote, tiebreaker, all these things. So it seems to me through this experience, we haven't, Nick, landed yet on what that is, but
yeah, and it works because it wants to work. Like, in other words, we don't really have to define it for it to work. It will work if that's what ecological intelligence is saying, is that the ecosystems that we live in will make that thing that we're looking for happen if we let it. And your framework lets it.
I also wonder, not sure, but if it's less about the third thing and more about establishing this triangulation of relationships. So if you only have two, you just have a relationship going this way. But if you suddenly put a third thing, you now have these two other relationships that are going out this way. And I think we shouldn't discount the space between the things.
Yeah, I think that as a non-collaborator looking at this back 5-6 years ago, the idea that it was linear, collaboration seemed to be linear, like from science to artist to audience, as opposed to making them all part of the same geometry. That's part of it. Nick, did you want to respond to anything you heard about this?
No, I'll leave some room for some others, but thank you, people, thank you everybody for your thoughts.
Ron, did you have a question or comment?
Observation, certainly. So those who don't know, I was part of some of the early or recent discussions about the blueprint. So I had that context. I knew of the call, and I knew there was 2 projects that were being done, but I came today with fresh eyes. So what I have to offer is my first impression of both of your projects and your presentations, and really impressed with Broto in the first place. In addition to the talking and the discussion and the writing and the Miro board work that we've done, is to prototype the idea, or maybe to coin a word, to Broto type the idea, and to commission, as Ian has, 2 groups to work with this, and let's see what happens and what we learn and where it goes. So I think that is what is really significant, is that there was some action taken, and we were trying some things, and we were experimenting and learning. And this is just the start. What makes this so significant is that your two projects are early in the process, or at the very beginning of the process, and things that are at the seed beginnings are just way more important in scale and scope, because they lead to everything else. So these projects, I like the metaphors that were chosen. The island, as an example, is you can consider every landmass that has a seashore, an island, and the issues, whether it's a small island or a big island. Love that metaphor, and using the mushroom in the other project as a way to communicate some ideas. Both very powerful. As it's already been mentioned before, you both have a very positive aura around what you're doing, and somebody mentioned the word hope, and there's a hopeful energy in what you're doing, and I think that is so important. I mean, there's enough. Well, maybe there's not enough. We need more criticism and some crying wolf and those kinds of things. But even more importantly, we need to start the groundswell of the positive alternatives. And what I've seen in these two projects does that. And I like the idea of how you've tried to embody or experiment with having more than two elements in a collaboration. To sort of further a metaphor, it starts as a point, and then Ian picked up, 2 points are a line, and then further was mentioned, at a third point, now you have a plane, you actually have an area, you have a surface, and so you add a whole new dimension by adding a third element. And I don't know that there's one term that will ever describe this. I think of the adage of the blind man trying to describe an elephant, and depending on what part you grab at the time, you have 6 or 7 definitions of an elephant, being a rope, a stump, a tree, a wall, a spear, a leaf, all those kinds of things. And I think the third element of a collaboration will have 6 or 7 elements like that, depending on which perspective you take and which lens you look at it through. So congratulations to both groups for doing this important early work, and for Broto for prototyping the blueprint. So I'm very impressed and very hopeful, and look forward to seeing more of what you do, and then what spins off of what each of you do individually and in other collaborations, and how that inspires and the ripple will spread out. And so it was interesting, and I'm grateful for being able to see this early stage development, and people who are going to watch this video over the coming weeks and months and years are going to benefit from it as well. Good work, all.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a great summation. And I want to really say thank you and congratulations to the collaborators for their hard work and the results that they've been able to show us, and the progress and the insights, because this is, as Ron said, this is the first of many, I hope. So with that in mind, I will say adieu, and we'll meet again some other time. So thanks, everybody.